Not sure about Joe Hayden, but I did see Justin Gilbert, no concussion, so he will be able to play because they were getting really thin in that defensive backfield. But let's say that. Professionalism, everybody's going to show up and try to win this game. What do you think? What are the odds that they can go out here and defeat the Panthers? Panthers have a lot of reasons to win this game. The Browns don't. So what do you expect to see?
Well, I expect to see a better effort, and I do not expect the Browns to win the football game. I really don't, much as I would like to say otherwise. Panthers have been playing better. They play better at home, and I think a lot depends on whether it's Newton or Anderson, certainly. But bottom line is, as John said, we're rolling out a guy who's not ready. And, I think that's the most important position on the field, and we got a guy making a second start, and it's hard to if you're thinking with your head instead of your heart, it's hard to project a Browns victory on the road with those being the circumstances.
Now, I know people say, and John and I just talked a little bit about it, and some of the listeners have said, well, it doesn't matter what Manziel, it doesn't matter what the Browns do in the last 2 weeks, so on and so forth. While I understand the thought process behind that, I don't at the same time, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm not even going to talk about this from the aspect of an NFL executive and how they would look at this, or the Browns front office or anything, but I'll just look at it from the aspect of the fan base. You would have, I'm not saying you got to win these games, I'm not saying anything like that, but there has to be something to hang on to, especially for Manziel coming out of these last 2 weeks, because I don't care how much you want to sell me on the future. Let's say they end 7-9 this year. That's still better than they've done in a while, and that's a 7-win season coming off of 4-12. To me, it's a hard sell in the offseason to sell the fan base, let alone the locker room, that you're coming back with this guy and you're willing to take a step back because you understand that it's going to be a developmental year coming up and you may have to have a 3 or 4 win season. How in the world do you look at the fan base and sell that and expect them to embrace it after you just told them you're past that now, is what I'm saying. Because this season kind of accelerated people's expectations. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's accelerated people's expectations. So it's kind of hard for people to then be acceptable with a developmental year. So the Browns are in a tricky position. You have got to have something positive to hang your hat on just to say, hey, we're going to develop him. We're going to prop him up. But, hey, did you see this, and this in the last 2 weeks? Because if they're all like the first one, it's very hard for the fans or for the locker room to buy into that as the plan. It can be part of the plan for next year, but it can't be the plan.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, you need to see something to hang your hat on over the last 2 weeks, but and specifically, you need to see something from Johnny Manziel, not necessarily from the Cleveland Browns as a team in terms of their effort or wins or losses. But as far as it being a developmental season next year, let's face it, it is one, no matter what happens in the last 2 weeks with Johnny Manziel.
That's ridiculous.
On the plus side for the organization, I guess the good news is this team in a football town doesn't need to worry themselves about selling tickets to people like the Cleveland Indians do, for example. It just isn't that great a concern. They're going to put people in those chairs there. And I'm not saying no matter what they do, but let's face it, we've watched 15 years of horrendous football, and they haven't had attendance problems. So not to say they could never be better, they could never sell another, there's no empty orange seats on Sunday, because there are always a few. But that's not the greatest concern of the organization going forward. How are we going to sell tickets? But let's face it, whether it's with, Brett Hundley or with Johnny Manziel or someone else, this is going to be a developmental year next year because, I don't think Hoyer will be back, and we're going to have a greenhorn at quarterback no matter what number his jersey says.
See, that's tough. When I said selling it to the fan base, I didn't mean as far as ticket sales. I mean as far as just the general
enthusiasm.
Attitude, yes, of we finally have begun to turn the corner. People are like, hey, 7 wins. It's not the greatest, but it's acceptable. It's progress. I mean, I know that that's a tough one. And the same thing, too, in the locker room. People will say, well, the players will do whatever the boss tells them. Well, okay, that's fine. But, again, same thing, man. That's a tough one. And then it's just it's a step backwards when obviously that wasn't in the plans. I don't care what anybody says. That was not in the plans whatsoever. So, that's something to consider as well. But I meant Manziel when you said see something. I didn't mean the rest of the team.
Yeah, you really do need to see something from him because
if you see nothing, how do you not have a backup plan? You know how this year everybody said, well, you got to have a backup plan for Hoyer just in case his knee isn't good. How do you see nothing for the next 2 weeks and go into next year with no backup plan at quarterback? There's no way you can do that.
Right, I agree, and I think they would probably have to look at that very shallow pool of free agent quarterbacks who are available and sign some veteran of some reputation or some experience level, just to have a warm body back there that won't be taking his first snap from center.
Colt, come home.
Bite your tongue, Jerry. Bite your tongue. You know what I'm saying?
You lived through it once.
I've seen that list of free agent quarterbacks out there, and let's put it this way: Brian Hoyer is among the better ones.
Yes, he is, and that's why I say the Browns may realize that, Dan. They may sit down when the emotion of this season is over. Now, assuming, of course, that the right offer for Brian Hoyer is not there from somewhere else, and I just keep seeing O'Brien in Texas, and I keep going, or Houston Texans, and I go, man. That could be the destination spot right there. But I think
Terrell Pryor's out there.
Well, I'm just saying, when the emotions of the season wear off and the Browns look back at what really happened and they take the emotion and the pressure of the quarterback situation late in the season and all that out of it, they may look back and go, hey, that wasn't the worst way to go in the world, especially, as you said, when you start to look at that other list. And I think Hoyer, too, as hurt as he may be at the way things happened, he may also, if the right offer isn't out there, look back and say, hey, Mike Pettin gave me a chance, and you know what? Hey, this kid's not good enough to beat me again in training camp, so I'll just go out there and I'll beat him out again. I'm just saying, don't completely write that off, but I think he gets a starting offer somewhere else. I think it's going to be Houston.
Yeah, that may very well be, and after him, I saw the list. There's about 20 free agent quarterbacks on that list, and when names like Terrell Pryor and things like that are jumping off the list at me and at least making me scratch my head going, well, maybe he might be worth a shot. And none of them, not a one of them is, I think, a long-term starter in this league. And so you may have to look to the draft again. And we talked about that a little bit Monday. That's not a good option either because there's so many other holes on this team.
And you're still starting over. Either way, you're still starting over again there,
Right.
Derek Anderson, what are you doing, man? Anyways. You're listening to the Sports Fix. J-Rock, Dan Wismar, doing the Cleveland sports thing, which is what we do. I like to say it's the fun house inside the haunted house that is Cleveland sports here, man. Hey, you mentioned the Indians, and this ain't going to sell any tickets, as the expression would go, but what were your thoughts? They picked up Gavin Floyd here this week. I think, and then this is not Homer hopefulism, I truly think that he has a very good chance to be Scotty Kazmir 2.0. I believe that he is medically recovered enough, and he was successful enough in the past that I think the Indians have a good shot here. And the fact that they directly are dropping him in the rotation tells me that they do too. Otherwise, they would have cautioned the fan base and just said he's getting an opportunity and we're going to add a body to the pile. But for them to commit a spot ahead of the, a guy like Salazar perhaps, and those guys says that they're pretty confident that he's going to be able to do something. I like it. I do. What do you think?
Well, yeah, there's certainly the potential is there, and of course the difference, as several people have pointed out right away, is that between him and Scott Kazmir,
lefty right,
is that got a roster spot, got a guaranteed salary. This is a commitment much more so than it was with Kazmir. They got lucky with Kazmir and got a good season out of him. But Floyd, for him to be placed right into the rotation, not in the top 5, but in the top 4, by the front office right off the bat, tells me I hope they know something we don't know. Guys had 2 surgeries in the last year and a half, and that's always a crapshoot. I did notice something. I looked him up yesterday because I wanted to just get into the background a little bit, and I looked up his baseball reference page. First thing that jumped off the page at me, and caused me to go, was Agent Ron Shapiro.
Well, yeah, of course there's going to be the connection.
Obviously a connection with the organization, and whether that had anything to do with $4 million guaranteed, who knows? Obviously, they're doing what they can to better the club. The guy, has a winning record, and I heard you say he's got a winning record against Detroit Tigers. That's not everything, but it's something. He's
7-3 lifetime against the Tigers, man. So
yeah, and he gives you some balance. You needed a lefty in that rotation, or you ideally would like to have one at least. And to have T.J. House and Danny Salazar fighting for the fifth spot in the rotation, a lot of teams are in a lot worse spots than that. From the standpoint of their starting pitching. So interesting that he came out with his front four of Kluber, Carrasco, Bauer, and Floyd now in the top four, and let the other guys fight it out. And you threw in Markham and Tomlin and those guys too. But obviously, like anybody else, I'm hopeful. Sometimes you can add a mile an hour or two to the fastball after the Tommy John surgery. Let that be the case with this guy, and throw him out there and see what he can do. And $4 million in this day and age is a cheap starting pitcher.
You know what?
So,
go ahead. No, I was just going to jump in with what you were saying there. Absolutely, because once you start getting into the incentives, then you're getting your money's worth, and at that point, even if he ends up collecting the whole $10 million from you got what a $10 million pitcher is going to give you in today's market. So I think the deal itself is good enough. And as you said, joking about the Tommy John, if he was a 500 lifetime pitcher before that, they're figuring, well, he's going to win a Cy Young now because that's like the make him better surgery nowadays. And of course.
Now, is there anybody? Now, Kluber's had Tommy John, Carrasco has had Tommy John, Bauer has had Tommy John. Am I right?
Is there anybody who hasn't?
No, that would be your top four in your rotation. All have coming off Tommy John surgery. That's kind of remarkable. I don't know if that's ever been done before.
Wow. That's like the Tommy John rotation, man. Like
exactly.
Wow, man. That's kind of
we got four bionic elbows, and then.
You got to get
Salazar's had it too, right? If he becomes this guy,
yes, you get
we would be
Frank Job or whatever, Dr. Andrews and Dr. Job. You got to get them to come in as the pioneers of that stuff with the team photo this year, and everybody holds their elbows and their X-ray out when they take the team photo. And
now I am right about Bauer. Am I not? Did he not have Tommy John?
You know what? I don't believe Bauer has. You're right about Salazar, though. I don't believe
Salazar and Carrasco too, right?
Yes, absolutely on those guys. Yes,
and Kluber. Yeah, so that's fine. I'm just not sure on Bauer. Something tells me he had a surgery, but I wasn't sure if it was Tommy John. I'll have to check that out. But that's the only one I wasn't sure about.
But it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Again, a lot of people giving me the grumble, the whole, they signed a 248 hitter and a 500. I really do. And you guys know I'm not just every signing. I don't just go, I'm going to see what. I thought that I'm good at reading, or I like to think I'm stuff that these guys say when they do their coach speak and their organization talk and all that stuff. And I felt that with them being so strong about it, I said, okay, I mean, they obviously think that the health is not going to be an issue here, and all we do is praise Mickey Callaway all day long. So I'm just adding 1 and 2, and as long as they equal 3, then I think this should be a good deal for the Indians here. And if not, as you said, it's low risk enough financially that they can cut ties. It could end up being like Myers a few years ago, where it ends up just costing you $4 million in a few months of nothing happening. And you've got a lot of depth there too, because as they said, they want to be 8 or 9 deep here with that starting rotation.
Right, and he threw, I think, McAllister in that bunch too, but I don't think anybody really thinks McAllister will be anything but a middle reliever on this team, or maybe a 6th or 7th inning guy for him, next year, because he looked pretty good in that role last year, and I don't think anyone really envisions this club, at least, putting him back into a starting role.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I believe that you're mistaken about the Tommy John with Bauer, but with those other guys, it is correct.
Yeah, I wasn't sure on that. It seemed to me he had some surgery, but like I said, I wasn't sure about that one.
No, he actually came out against it. He talked about how a lot of people are having that. But anyways, it's going to be interesting to see. And I talked earlier. I don't know if you heard, but we just kind of went around this division, the most active one in baseball here so far. Each of these teams, the Royals have kind of had to counter off the losses that they've had. If James Shields leaves on